Okay, now we're starting. Okay, I want to welcome all of us, the Serrans from the United States and friends of Serra and any Serrans from around the world. This is the 49th meeting of our Serra Meets, and our first meeting was December the 12th of 2020, so right in the midst of COVID. I'm your host. I'm Ann Rote. I'm a member of the Serra Club of Lafayette in Indiana, and then also the president of the United States Council. And I'm going to officially call this meeting to order, and I'm going to ask Eleanor Gentilini, who is the regional director from the Rocky Mountain region of the United States and a member of our the board of the U.S. Council, to say our opening prayer. Eleanor?
Okay, this is called a prayer for new beginnings. Dear Lord, as we enter this new year, we seek your guidance for new beginnings. Grant us the strength to let go of past burdens and embrace the opportunities ahead with faith and optimism. May your light lead us on the path of righteousness, and your grace empower us to achieve our goals. Help us to start this year anew with a heart full of hope and a spirit ready to serve you. Bless our efforts and make this year a time of growth and blessings. Amen.
Thank you,
Amen.
Eleanor. As you know, this meeting is going to be recorded, and then you can always access it on our Serra YouTube channel. A link from the meeting to a link to the YouTube channel will be on our Serra website. And I know many of our clubs will use this as part of their regular meeting, or just sometimes if a speaker doesn't show up, they'll be able to use it that way. Or sometimes they use it as a recording, just like a little excerpt in their meeting. Our meeting today will be about 1 hour, and it will take the form of like what a typical Serra Club meeting would be like. So we've got the opening prayer, we're going to have a speaker, we'll have some business, and then a closing prayer. We will have time for questions and answers, and you can always ask a question just by putting it in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you can type your question in there, we'll be able to get to that. So use that. Our keynote speaker today is kind of a treat. Some of you know him. I'm going to hope you all know him. It's our executive director, John Liston. John actually lives in Chicago. He's married and has 2 lovely little children. Sometimes we get to see them on some of our meetings, our Zoom meetings. But John went to Archbishop, oh, there he's got a picture of them, of the boys.
Aw.
John went to Archbishop Quigley High School Seminary, which was funny because growing up, I grew up in Chicago, and I remember there were 2 Quigleys at that time. John earned a Bachelor of Science from Darla Moore School of Business at the University of South Carolina. He also received degrees in international business, human resources management, and entrepreneurship. He obtained his Juris Doctorate from Loyola University in Chicago, the School of Law there, with a certificate in advocacy. It sounds like he belongs in Serra. After becoming the executive director before becoming our executive director, he worked for the law firm of Sanchez, Daniels, and Hoffman as a civil defense attorney. In addition to his work for Serra, John is an adjunct professor at Loyola, where he teaches courses in negotiation, mediation, and client counseling. John is also treasurer for the Innovation Experts, a non-for-profit that provides support services for public libraries. John's going to be talking to us today about Serra, just sort of our history, because we're coming up on our 90th anniversary. So this is a perfect opportunity for us to get up to speed and learn about our organization. John, welcome to Serra Meets.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rote. It's nice to be in front of the camera or on camera during one of these rather than just behind the scenes pushing the buttons. And thank you all for coming out. This is our 90th year, and so we're going to be doing a number of great things as we move forward to celebrate the incredibly rich and vibrant history of Serra. We're probably going to put together a book on it. And some have said we might need to call it or fiction, because you probably wouldn't believe all of the things that have happened over the past 9 decades with our apostolate. So I've got a few slides that I prepared. I call it 90 Years of Serra, an oral history with pictures. So we're going to go to where it all began, and that is Seattle, Washington in 1935. This is a picture of the city from back then, and it looks very different from what it does now. Probably the only constant is Mount Rainier. So the original founders met in the home of Leo Sharkey, and this is a picture of his actual house. They got together in 1935, or 1934 was the first meeting. But the founders got together because they were actually 4 Catholic laymen who were not allowed to join Rotary because they were Catholic. And they were Harold Haberly. He was considered to be the spiritual core of Serra, and he was the first president of the Seattle Serra Club. There was also Dan Rooney, who was the second president, and he did a lot of the administrative work to help get the clubs founded. He was responsible for chartering over a dozen Serra clubs, and that is a record that may still stand to this day. Additionally, there was Leo Sharkey, who was one of the youngest of the group, and he was the driving force behind the Serra newsletters, which in the era before email, that was the primary means of communication for all Serra clubs. And finally, there was Richard Ward, who was the original author of the Serra Constitution and bylaws. And as you go over the years, it really is amazing to see how little our governing documents have changed and how well we were set up from the beginning. Someone who's often overlooked in the history of Serra is Jack Bray. He's the one who is credited with picking Father Serra as our patron, which if you go back to 1935, Father Serra was, an important figure in the history of California. He had just gotten his statue in the Capitol Rotunda. Amazing. California was putting up statues of Father Serra back then, rather than what's going on right now. But he was the one who's credited with, using Father Serra as a model for holiness and perseverance. And Father Noel Maholi was one of the other driving forces in that. So Serra started, as it always starts, with the approval of the bishop. And there you see a picture of Bishop Shaughnessy. And he was the one who said that, Serra needs to be formed. We should move slowly, humbly, soundly, and think with the mind of the church. And I feel like we've done a very good job of that as an organization from the beginning, and we continue that to the day. The chaplain really remains the spiritual anchor of Serra, and that's how it's always been. And there you see the picture of the first Serra chaplain that Bishop Shaughnessy appointed.
No, Gallagher.
So people wonder why Serra had the vocations objective, and that came from John Jeanette. John Jeanette's son actually became a priest about 15 years after John was involved in the formation of Serra. And there was a book written, The Miracle of the Priesthood, that was published in 1963 about this. One of the first programs that the Serra Club did involves St. Edward's Seminary in Seattle, Washington. And they brought students there as kind of the first Quo Vadis or come and see weekend. Here's a great piece of Serra history. You see, these are the original accounting. So Serrans would pay 25 cents per meeting. So if you, I use the inflation calculator today, and if you inflate that out from $1935 to $2025, the dues for Serra would be around $300. So we've done a really good job of managing that. Here's one of the few charter photos we have from a club. This was the founding of the Serra Club of Portland in Oregon back in 1937. Some of the original club programs you see here are remarkably similar to what we have today. The Day of Discovery, the Portland Club still does Quo Vadis Days. The parish vocation councils, Dr. Roach, does that sound familiar? Is that
Yes,
what we're
wow.
doing with Spark and Ignite? The Vigil for Vocations. This is actually a program that continues on. I know that Serra in Great Britain has kept this going for the last 25 or 30 years. I don't know of many US clubs that do that, where they have an evening vigil for vocations. And then this one, summer employment for seminarians. We've gone away from the need for that because there have been more programs that keep seminarians occupied. But there was a time when many Serrans would hire seminarians to work for them over the summer, to provide them with resources and to keep them out of trouble.
Mhm.
Here you'll see the original constitution of Serra. And back then we only had two objectives. And one of them was to form enduring friendships among Catholic men. Serra was considered to be the University of Christian Principles at the time. And that's something that continues to this day. Dr. Tom Sheen was the first president of Serra International. By 1938, we had 5 clubs and we needed leadership overall. In 1941, we put out our first publicity manual to try and further establish what Serra was and help us grow on a national and global level. Here you see a quote from John Donahue, who was the 3rd executive director of Serra International. And again, I think it carries through to this day that Serrans are vowed to the task of exemplifying the work of human society and sharing a consciousness explanation of the divine possibilities to vocations to the priesthood. That continues to drive us to this day. Here you'll see something that's very important in the life of our organization. In 1951, Serra was aggregated to the Pontifical Work for Priestly Vocations. And we are the only lay organization that has that distinction and that honor. With it comes some spiritual benefits, including indulgences. I really don't like using that in selling Serra to other people because of the church's difficulties with that way back when. But that is a privilege and an honor that Serrans receive. And we will be sharing more information about that at the convention, which this year will be in Kansas City. And as a fun historical side note, it was at the 1951 convention in Kansas City, which is in the same location, the same property as the Kansas City Marriott, where we're holding this year's convention, that we received the notice of the aggregation.
Oh,
We're going to be doing a lot more to talk about that element of our history and what that's done for helping Serra throughout the years. The Vocational Institute in the 1960s, many clubs started working to promote not just diocesan vocations, but also vocations to religious orders. And this was a program that came out of the Serra Club of Wichita. And we were able to get some of the information on that from the Serra Magazine archives, which we have available online. And that's another piece of our history that will be made available to everyone. These next slides talk about kind of the expansion of Serra globally. And when you look at how Serra grew, it's really remarkable to see. We were founded as Serra International. If let me go back to the governing documents, you'll see that's what we called ourselves even back in 1938. But the reason for that is because if you're in Seattle, Washington, you just presume that you're going to go up to Canada. And that's why we called ourselves Serra International. Our founders, maybe they had grand plans to go globally, but I don't think they really foresaw the depth and the expansion of Serra. Our first club outside the US was in Canada, but much to their surprise, it was in Toronto, not Vancouver or Victoria, just north of Seattle. We then went to Lima, Peru, Mexico, England, and Genoa, Italy. And Cardinal Stritch, who was one of Serra's first Episcopal advisors, he was the main force behind that because he had family in Genoa. And then you'll see in the 1960s, Serra went to a great number of countries, both in South America and throughout Asia and Australia as well. So our organization really grew and flourished and became truly global in the 60s and 70s. The Call by Name program is one of Serra's real treasures, and that's a thing that is used all around the world by Serra clubs everywhere. Another one is the 31 Club, and the gentleman you see there, Paul Mariani, actually started that club in New Zealand. That's where the 31 Club came from, and then it kind of percolated up to the international level and was disseminated worldwide. The First Steps program, this is really the basis for the Quo Vadis weekends, and also, I don't know if you have Totus Tuus programs, but that's borrowed heavily.
Yeah.
An interesting historical note for Serra is one of our international presidents actually went on to become a priest. Tom Murphy from Indianapolis served as president of Serra International. He was a bachelor, and then after his presidency, he went on to seminary and became a priest. This is a very appropriate year to talk about female leadership in Serra, because it just so happens that at this moment, the presidents of Serra International, Dr. Moira McQueen, the U.S. Counsel, Dr. Ann Rote, and the Serra International Foundation, Cindy Bell, who she'll get a doctorate at some point. She's working on it. Are leading the main pieces of our organization. But here you'll see that Mary Lynn was the first female trustee of Serra International all the way back in 1961. That was just 5 years after we allowed women to become members. Claire Howard was the first female president of the U.S. Council. Dr. Rote is our third. And Sue Chehersky was the first female president of Serra International. Dr. McQueen is our second. I cannot imagine where Serra would be if we did not have the phenomenal female leadership that we've had over the years. So we've had some amazing speakers over the years at conventions, including Archbishop Fulton Sheen, Cardinal Tagle, and many other just amazing Catholics who have brought in great things to the church. So these are just a few examples of, who's come to speak at our conventions. And usually, let me back up to that for 1 second. Usually Serra has a great job of finding people before they explode onto the international stage. We're very good at identifying talent. Cardinal Tagle spoke to the 2004 convention in Bangkok when he was the Bishop of Imus in the Philippines. He's now running, he's a pro-prefect for a dicastery in the Vatican now, and he's on several short lists for the potential next Holy Father. So
Wow.
we've been thrilled to have such great people. Over the years, the leadership structure of Serra has changed a little bit. It used to be we would just have a number of vice presidents. And so every year, the first vice president would become the president-elect, and then the president, and so on. But we've gone away from that to a more portfolio-based vice presidency with vice presidents for membership programs, vocations, communications, and in some places, cultural outreach. So I thought this quote was very apropos since we are in another Jubilee year. This is a photo from the year 2000 when there was a Serran pilgrimage to Rome for the Jubilee. And there you see the words of John Paul II to the Serrans who were there, encouraging us to be a people of communion, supporting priests with active affection, with characteristic charity, showing the needs of the church for vocations, especially among the poor. And we've been privileged to meet with not just St. John Paul II, but as recently as 2017, we were able to have a private audience with the Holy Father during our convention in Rome. So there's so many wonderful nuggets and unique historical facets of Serra. I wanted to give just a quick overview and then open it up to any questions you may have, and also to encourage you to share with us the history of your club, because we're working on a number of things for our 90th anniversary. And one of them is kind of a compendium of the history of Serra that we hope to have available at the convention in Kansas City. So we've set up a dedicated email address for this, and we'll be sending out more information following the Serra rally in Miami about how you can share your favorite memories of Serra, any photos you have. I'm sure many people on this meeting have a thing where here's a unique experience I had because I was part of Serra. It's really so amazing to see all of the doors that open up and the way that priests and religious kind of relax when you tell them, I'm a Serra. If they know Serra, then they feel that they're in a place with people that trust and support them. And you normally get, I'd say, a less filtered version of their opinions of certain things, which it is a great honor for us to be able to know and for us to participate in the church in that way. So I covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time. Does anyone have any questions at the moment?
John, let me ask you though, what is one of your favorite Serra stories
Um,
that you can tell in public?
that I can tell in public. I mean, there's so many, but going back to the point of, the hierarchy just kind of letting their hair down. At the convention in Chiang Mai, Thailand, we were privileged to have the apostolic nuncio for Thailand, Myanmar, and I think Cambodia with us. And every day I would come down for breakfast, and I would normally go down early because I need to make sure everything's set up. And I'd see the nuncio just sitting there with a different group of Serrans every day, talking about things. He was from, I believe, Oklahoma. So a lot of the Midwestern Serrans got to share stories with him about this and that. And again, just the way in which we were received was so remarkable. And I've seen that with cardinals and bishops from around the world, where, as I said, they recognize and they respect and they appreciate the things that Serra does. And for the size of our apostolate, that's really amazing. But the political capital and the trust that we've engendered over the years, I think, is truly worthwhile.
Thank you. Okay, wait a minute. Oh, has any correlation been seen in the number of Serrans worldwide historically compared to the rise and fall of clergy? More clergy, more Serrans. Fall of clergy, numbers, etc. Yeah.
That is an interesting statistic that I don't think we have really mapped out. I will tell you that right now we are not at peak Serra membership. I believe that happened in the early to mid 2000s. The largest number of Serrans in the US I've ever seen was 11,000. And we're not at that level at this point. But I never thought to graph the Serra membership with vocations. And I don't know if doing that on a global level would make sense, or if we could be more targeted and kind of look at how vocations do in dioceses that have Serra clubs versus dioceses that don't have Serra clubs. That's an interesting thing to look into, T. Wayne. Thank you for putting that on my radar.
Thank you. Okay, other questions? Come on, people.
So a story that I can tell
Okay.
is from the convention in Anchorage, Alaska, which was 2008 or 2009. We had a Cardinal Okoji from Nigeria coming in as our keynote speaker. And I got to be part of the delegation that picked him up, even though I was just the office boy at the time. And we go in and we meet the Cardinal, and there's his priest secretary, and we're standing with them at baggage claim, and we're, how's your flight? How's everything? You must be very tired. And the carousel's going around, Pretty soon all the bags are gone, but the Cardinal and his priest secretary are still waiting there. So somewhere between Lagos and Anchorage, their bags got misplaced.
Oh.
So we said, we'll take care of it. Don't worry, Your Eminence. What can we do for you? And he said, oh, just get a list from my pre-secretary and go buy the things that we need. And so I wound up at about 9:30 at night driving to the Walmart in Anchorage, Alaska to pick up supplies for a cardinal and his pre-secretary. And yes, I had to buy red undergarments because what else do you get for cardinal?
They didn't have black.
No.
Mhm.
John?
Nice, nice.
Yes,
How-
Mike.
How many executive directors have there been for Serra?
I am the 8th, and there will be a 9th.
Okay,
Interesting, interesting. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
You know, when we were at the National Eucharistic Congress and we had the prayer booth this summer, one of the a bishop, I guess it was an archbishop, came by and was asking us what we were doing. And he says, oh, I really love Serra, blah, blah, blah. And then he said, so I always said, my parents always had us say the Serra prayer for vocations, right when we were every evening. And with that, he just immediately spouted off the Serra prayer for vocations.
Oh.
And I mean, it was just amazing. So, I mean, there's an effect. We're having an effect there. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions? We're not putting John on the spot. That's horrible.
speak for yourself.
John, this is going, and this is recorded. And I'm just thinking that this presentation would be so wonderful for clubs.
Mm.
I mean, it's a great sort of encapsulation of our history, and I think our clubs would love to see it. So definitely, you want to people. This will be on the website, and you'll be able to use it. There's a question. Let's see. It's interesting to see how Serra International has grown globally in the span of a couple of decades historically. But today, what else do you foresee Serra International going in terms of countries or region? Oh, good. John, where do you see us going?
Wonderful question, Andrea. Thank you. So we have leads on Serra clubs, and really, Serra has always grown because of its members. People will, have a relation or a friend or someone in another place and say, I'm a part of this group. I think you would really enjoy it. I think this would be good for you. So that Serra has grown organically. We haven't really targeted places to grow. However, there are several hotbed areas right now, one of them being Nigeria. We continue to charter new clubs in Nigeria. It's been one pretty much every other year.
Wow.
And of interest, we have strong contacts in the United Arab Emirates that are it's not the bishop, I forget the term now, but the local ordinary over there has expressed interest in forming a Serra club in the Emirates. And we
Wow.
also have leads on Serra clubs in Japan. So those are two countries where we're looking to grow right now. We have had some interest also from Germany. So we're going to go back into Germany. We had a club in Heidelberg back in 1951. But I believe that was on a US either Air Force or a military base of some kind. It wasn't a truly German Serra club. So, so we're always looking for new places. And if you have leads for us, please contact us. We'd be happy to work with them and send out the information. And that's both foreign and domestic. We still, by last count, I think we have Serra clubs in, was it 130 some odd dioceses in the US? And there are dioceses that do not have Serra clubs. So we still have work to do here.
Yeah, and we know who they are.
Yeah. And speaking of a club in every diocese, up until 2 years ago, Thailand had 2 Serra clubs in every diocese. And that's a country that is half of 1% Catholic. And the only reason they don't have a club in every diocese now is Chiang Mai, which is where we had the international convention 2 years ago, split into 2 dioceses. And there's not a club in Chiang Rai, which is the newly formed diocese, but they're working on that.
But if you know of places in the United States, and we know who doesn't have a Serra Club, we'd love to have one there. Or just if you need another one in the diocese, that's great too. I know Candace will be thrilled to talk to you about it. Okay, well, thank you, John. Boy, that was just great. I really loved the PowerPoint too. So now we're going to go into the business portion of our meeting, and we've actually got 2 subjects today. First, we're going to hear from Mike Downey, who's our immediate past president, and Mike is going to be talking about the work of the nominating committee. We have just done marathon interviews. I think we did like, maybe 6-7 hours of interviews last week for that committee, but Mike's going to talk to us about that. And then we're going to hear from Cindy Bell, who is the brand, 3 weeks?
3 weeks, yeah.
3 weeks, brand new president of our Serra Foundation. And she's going to be talking to us a little bit about the foundation. So we're thrilled to have her. So we're going to start with Mike right now. And I understand John's got some slides.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. It's a pleasure to be on here. And I give a lot of credit to Ann for suggesting this topic. You know, I occasionally get questions when we send out every year to the clubs a document asking them to approve the slate of officers. And a lot of people wonder, how'd you come up with that? And how can we be influential in that? So this is going to be a talk a little bit about the nominating process for leadership in the U.S. Council. Yeah, I'd like to explain this process to you. And if you have any questions about this, be sure to use the Q&A function. I'll talk in the end here, but I'm going to make it pretty short and concise. So in the next slide, the leadership nominating process is really the responsibility of the nominating committee of the U.S. Council. Yeah, there we go. And the nomination committee is made up of the chair, typically and traditionally, is the immediate past president. So that's me this year. We also have on the committee the current president, Dr. Ann Rote, the current president-elect, which is Colonel John Halloran. And then we have 3 past presidents, Richard Arians, Bob Labatt, and Dan Jones. And if I could have the next slide, John. The purpose of the committee, it has 3 primary responsibilities. The first one is to recommend a slate of officers and board members for the coming year to the board to approve. And then the board, if they approve that, sends those out to the club presidents for their approval. The second one is to identify future prospects for board membership. And we're kind of looking beyond the current year in that case. We're looking for people that are out there who may have an interest 2, 3, 4, or 5 years from now in being on the board or in a leadership position in Serra. And the third, which is a little bit more less identified, but it's very important, is to record ideas for improving the U.S. Council. You know, our board has 19 members. We have the president-elect, and the past president. We have a secretary and a treasurer. We have 5 vice presidents for the standing committees of vocations, programs, communications, membership, and cultural outreach. And then we have a region director from each of the 9 regions. So there's 19 people, I think, if I counted that right.
Yeah.
And one of the problems we have is our board meetings are pretty intense, and people's participation tends to be sort of in the area that they're responsible for. One thing that goes on in this process of interviewing each member of the board every year is it gives them a chance to give input about other things beyond just the areas they're responsible for. And we like to try and capture those ideas for how we can improve the U.S. Council. So what we do is we start with a series of interviews of the existing positions on the board. And there are 16 positions that are not on our committee. So we interview each person for about a half an hour. And we use a standard set of questions for everybody so that we sort of get uniform input in terms of what's coming on, what people are thinking. And one of the most important things we ask is whether they're willing to serve an additional year. We ask that every year, so that people aren't put in the position of getting on the board and then kind of being trapped into a position forever because nobody can find somebody to replace them. So we asked them, are you willing to serve for an additional year? And then we also asked them, do you have an interest in moving up to either be president or some other position? And then we look for ideas for improvement. So each of those interviews takes a half an hour, and we went through 13 of the 16 positions in this last week. So that would be 7.5 hours, I think, 6.5 hours of interviews. And we'll probably do an interview process after the rally. We'll catch up on the 3 we didn't get this time that were on the board, and then we'll probably do 10 to 14 prospects. And that's kind of a way to feel out people that might be future region directors, future district governors, or future vice presidents of different committees. And then finally, when we're done with that, we will propose the slate of upcoming officers to the board for the April meeting for their approval, and they will send it out to the club presidents for final approval. So this is not written in stone anywhere, but I think it's good for people to know. You know, there's sort of 2 pathways to leadership in the U.S. Council. If you want to be a president, for example, and all of them start with club president. That's not required, but almost universally it's true, is that everybody in the process has been a club president. And we think that's really important because the U.S. Council exists to serve clubs, and you need to know how a club runs or operates in order to be effective as a servant there. So it starts primarily as club presidents, and then the 2 paths are either people go up through district governor and region director, which is the path on the right of the slide, or they come up through the committee participation role, through the one of the 5 committees. They begin as a member of that committee, and eventually they gravitate to vice president of that committee. And when they're finally selected, when they have an interest in becoming president, they become president-elect and then president. So that gives you a little bit of a feel of the paths to leadership in the U.S. Council. But I think the most important thing to note there is that the club president, being a club president, is a pretty important requirement, I think, if you're going to be a good servant when you get above the club level for those clubs. That's kind of a real quick overview of the process and what we do. One thing we don't do a general solicitation of people that are interested in being on the board. And that's because, again, because of that requirement, we feel that you need to be a club president. I think the Serra International actually does have a general solicitation that they put out every year if people want to be on the board and they can be considered. Ours is a little bit more specific because of the need for the focus on how clubs operate. So that's a real quick overview of the nominating process for leadership in the U.S. Council, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that anybody has.
Mike, can you talk a little bit about how we surface names of the people who are not on the board that you're interviewing?
Yeah, a lot of that comes from the interview of the board members themselves. The board members are asked, as one of their questions is, do you know people in your region or district or anybody in Serra that might be a good leader in the future? And so we capture those names as part of the first phase of interviewing the board members. And then we operate from that. We usually winnow that down a little bit in terms of a time frame and take a look at those for prospects coming up. And then we have quite a list of names if you go back, because we have our minutes from the prior 3 years. And we got quite a list of prospects there. And so it becomes a matter of going back through the historical interviews that we've had, and then also the current interviews, which we rely on the most because those people are likely to have the most current interest. So.
And you capture those names and you keep them in a document. So you've got them going back a number of years.
Yeah, I've got them for as long as I've been on the committee here, which I think is 4 years. So. Any other questions about that? I would tell you this, that the nominating committee puts in enormous hours.
You can see that.
You know, you're talking about I think 10 to 12 hours of Zoom interviews. And those could be grueling if you do them one after another.
Yeah.
I find them just exhausted. I'm exhausted at the end of the day. But on the other hand, it's the input that we get from people that you think you know, you get a chance to talk to them. but when you structure it in these standard questions, the input that we get from people about ideas for what works and what isn't working or what we need to do is it's invaluable. And it gives people a chance to go, if you could be the cultural outreach vice president and still have ideas on new ways to gain membership. And those people usually don't get a chance to express that anywhere on the board, but they do get a chance to express it in these interviews. So that's one of the great advantages of the interview process and having standard questions for all the members of the board. And we also have another set of questions that are standard for all the prospects. So pretty much everybody gets asked those, and everybody is given the questions in advance, so they have a little chance to look at it.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
All right. So now we're going to hear from Cindy Bell. As I said, Cindy is brand new. She's been on the foundation for many, many years, but she just became president. And so we're welcoming Cindy again to Serra Meets, and she's going to tell us something about the foundation. Okay, Cindy?
Thank you so much, Anne. And it's a privilege to be in the same Serra Meets with John Liston and Mike Downey, because you both really did an excellent job of explaining and clarifying the procedures and the history of Serra. So thank you for the good work that you have done and continue to do. The Serra International Foundation was formed in 1951, the same year that Serra was aggregated to the Vatican. And it was created by the International Board with the purpose to financially support the Serra organization and its mission, serving our global church through vocations efforts. We are blessed with a board that has about 12 members from different backgrounds and geographical regions. The board manages the investments following the US CCB guidelines, and all grants from the foundation must be approved by the board. And then we present them to the international board for their information, which we will do later this week. The foundation gets its earnings not from your dues, not club dues or your personal dues, but from its investments and from voluntary donations from members, clubs, and other entities. The main fundraising methods are the annual giving appeal, which is at the end of the year. You might remember it from November, December. And then memorial and honor gifts, estate gifts, and special fundraising projects and grants from other organizations. So an example of a special fundraising project might be when the San Gabriel mission, which was founded by Father Serra, had a fire and had a lot of damage. So as Serrans, we contributed to the foundation, and then that money was given to that particular, the San Gabriel mission. Then it's very helpful if each club would have a club foundation rep. And that doesn't mean you have to ask your friends all for money several times a year, but it's mostly to be a communication conduit. So you could, it could be the president-elect, it could be the past president, it could be a new member that wants to learn more about that part of Serra. And so a few times a year, you would just tell them what the grants have been, or what, that the annual appeal is coming up, and to watch for it in their mail. And that's about all for now. I thought I'd be mercifully brief, and I hope to see some of you at the Serra Rally later this week. So thank you, Anne, for hosting, and God bless everyone.
Yeah, Cindy, could you remind us when those applications for the grants are due?
I can. So that's usually, first of all, the application is available on the foundation website, which you can get to through either the international website or the US Council website. And then most of the applications come in August. The deadline is the end of September. And that gives them a chance to vet the applications, make sure all the parts are filled in properly. And then each foundation board member is teamed with another board member. And we read through usually about 20 each. And in pairs, we kind of compare notes and discuss what might be a priority, maybe what maybe isn't as urgent. And then when we meet in person in December with the full board, we make those final decisions. We prayerfully make those decisions because there's always more requests for funds than there is money available. So we do need the Holy Spirit to guide us. And I like to think we listen. So
Yeah. And Cindy, can a local club ask for apply for a grant?
yes, yes. So a club, especially, like we wouldn't pay for you to do the same project every year, just like we wouldn't pay for electricity for a seminary every year because there are so many clubs and so many seminaries. But if it's a special project, for example, maybe we started the College Connection for Catholics years ago, which has now been taken over by the Newman clubs or the Newman centers around the United States. So that was something started within Serra, but that received a grant to develop that and spread that a little bit more. Some of the programs that John mentioned, like the 31 Club, I believe had some grants that they received to help spread that and develop it further. So, yeah, you could apply, and sometimes you don't get the full amount requested, and sometimes others seem to be a greater need, but we certainly do our best.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cindy. Okay, so
Thank you.
remember, folks, end of August, that you've got until the end of September to submit grants. So definitely do that. Yes. And just knowing that when you support our foundation, you're supporting the work of Serra. So please be generous.
Thank you.
Now, before our closing prayer, I'm going to ask Jerry Bees to talk to us about some of the upcoming speakers that we're going to be hearing on Serra Meets. Jerry?
Okay, thank you. And again, with Greg Schweit's help, we actually have the next 4 months scheduled. So as you know, we're now meeting the third Monday of the month at 7 p.m. Central. So we have Rosemary Sullivan, the Executive Director of the NC DVD. Her topic is going to be vocational fruit from the National Eucharistic Congress. So Rosemary is the exec of the National Council of Diocesan Vocation Directors. Vocational fruit from the National Eucharistic Congress. Then March 17th, Cardinal Thomas Collins, retired Bishop of Toronto, Canada, and Episcopal Advisor of Serra International, will have reflections during Lent for Serrans. April, we have Rosie Sauer, Executive Director of Catholic Campus Ministry Association. Her topic is going to be vocations at Catholic colleges. In May, we already have Father Jack Wall, Executive Director of the Catholic Extension Society.
Great.
Topic is going to be supporting priestly vocations in mission dioceses in the United States. And I understand he's a graduate of Notre Dame and at the
Which is
game.
why
And
he's not on tonight.
right.
Yeah, we have questions here just from, I think it's Mary Jane from Houston, asking if we could send copies of both slideshows, the one, the John's and Mike's. So yes, I'm sure we can do that. And thank you, Jerry. And I know Jerry's got some interesting people that he's pursuing for the next couple of months at Serra Meets. So I think you're really going to be thrilled with some of the people that he's asked.
And
Jerry,
we welcome
Jerry,
we
Has
welcome
the Pope-
suggestions.
Has the Pope returned our call yet?
No, no.
We're hoping, yes. No, but there's some good ones. There's some really good ones coming up. Yes. Okay, so then February 17th, please join us again. Let's see. Oh, that's right before Lent. And Rose Sullivan will be our guest speaker. So I'm kind of thrilled with that. With a good chance to hear Rose. And then I hope to see many of you at the rally this week. Or if not, then I hope to see you at our SI conference in Kansas City, which will be coming up in June. So don't forget, I just saw registration came out for that, just opened. So go to the website and get your registration for that. And I'm going to thank both Jerry and Greg, who usually work together and line up, Greg Schweitz, who line up our speakers for Sarah Meets. And now I'm going to invite Eleanor Gentilini to say our closing prayer. Eleanor?
Name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
O God, you have constituted your only begotten Son, supreme and eternal priest for the glory of your majesty and the salvation of mankind. Grant that those whom he has chosen ministers and dispensers of his mysteries may be found faithful in fulfilling the ministry they have received. Amen.
Amen.
And I want to thank Eleanor for stepping up to be the regional director in the Rocky Mountain region. And then also to our wonderful John Liston, who was our presenter tonight. Great job, John. And then Mike Downey, who really explained that nomination process very well. Cindy Bell, talking to us a little bit about foundation, Jerry Bees, and Greg Schweitz for getting all our wonderful speakers. And I'm going to say this concludes our meeting for this month. I'm going to thank everyone for attending and remind you to get the word out on the wonderful work that we as Sarans are doing. I'm hoping to see many of you at the rally this week or at a local Sarah Club meeting or maybe at an Ignite workshop. We're going to Phoenix in February. So if you're in Phoenix, and I see some Phoenix people on here, we'll see you in February doing Ignite for the diocese there. And then if not, we'll see you at the convention in Kansas City. St. Junipero, Sarah, pray
for us.
Yes.
Tell Mary Beth I said that, Jerry. Okay. Thank you all. See you all soon.